Was this part of the bigger plan? I don't know. And here, this is even more interesting. Same embrasures, aiming somewhat downwards. Sometimes in historical matters, you stumble onto something that nobody knows anything about. And in Eastern Europe, where so many wars were fought, where so many empires have been in charge, and others fought to break free from dominion or old alliances, well, finding a ruin in a forest full of bullet holes is not particularly strange. However, the journey as to what happened here or who built it, that took me over 2 years trying to find out, and now I finally found the answers and can share everything with you. We have been visiting some of the great forts of the Polish town of Przemysl, a town under siege 3 times during World War I, and one which saw fighting during World War II as well. But at the outbreak of World War I, Przemysl was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as was the next large town over east, Lviv, or Lemberg, a beautiful old city which had been rebuilt by the empire, and had an old fortress in the center as well, like so many others before. One, however, obsolete by 1914. But as the Austrians had feared a Russian strike, they had begun to construct smaller forts around the city to protect it. Lemberg was not just a city, it was the capital of the Austro crown land of Galicia, and a crucial military, political, and symbolic center. It was a crucially important and prestigious town for trade and politics, yet the defenses were near obsolete. Karl von Hötzendorf had doubts that he could hold the town. The initial Austrian plan had been for the Russians to advance in the south, so they could swing round from the north, where they had just had 2 victories against the Russians. But Hötzendorf had failed to detect the Russian strength build-up in the south, and could not halt the advance once it began. And after one last attempt at last stand, the stand at Gordok, on September 11th, the Austrian-Hungarian forces had to retreat in the face of a numerically superior Russian army, advancing hard. Brusilov was coming, and Hötzendorf could not hold him. Thus the desperate retreat back to Przemysl. But Austria had lost 350,000 dead or wounded, and would now have to look to the Germans for help regaining the town, which came in 1915. After Przemysl had been retaken from the Russians. And my favorite Field Marshal August von Mackensen, he drove his forces to the east, recapturing Lemberg, with some of his units advancing over 300 kilometers in just a few months. We will have to do a special on Mackensen, the last great hussar, a man who got things done, and even during the time of the Third Reich, he never replaced his imperial uniform. So, a ruin around the old Lemberg town, or today's Lviv, is not strange. And having just visited the amazing fort of Taratakiv further to the east, it was a good indication of what had happened here as well. But what was this, and what happened here? This is what I found as I saw it. Here in the hills outside Lemberg, there are ruins of something that is absolutely defensive. Something resembling a site of Custer's last stand, if he had had a few firing galleries. What makes this interesting is, I don't know what it is. I also don't know who built it. But looking at it, it pretty much looks like a whole bunch of firing ports covering a valley, if you ask me. Let's have a look at this. Now, there was a battle here. There's more. There was a battle here in 1914. And still disputed how serious that battle was. What is certain is the Austro-Hungarian army was routed very seriously by Russians and Cossack forces that took over the city fairly undamaged. So this is definitely built in brick. And I guess there's a little tunnel inside. What are we looking at here? Okay, I guess I could also take the door on the other side. That would make actually quite a bit more sense, wouldn't it? But I'm imagining here it's like a sloping firing gallery that just leads down to here with a probably in a door or a trench, and you are right on top of a hill, but we're definitely only fighting in one direction with that thing. Let's take a look at what this is. What the defenses of Lemberg or Lviv were at the time is still to me quite unclear. But I still starting to think I'm looking at them. This looks like a curved firing gallery to the other side. This almost looks like this hill is one looks like one big defensive position. Yeah, I mean, look at this. And this is full of bullet holes as well. Impacts. So, was this something they just slapped together for the defense of the city? Or was this part of a bigger plan? I don't know. See when we get inside this. Clearly firing ports, and clearly impacts. So this saw battle, wherever and however, so red brick clad with cement. I mean, this is exactly what it looked like. This is not decay, this is fire. This is direct fire. Well, let's have a look, see what we can see in here. Definitely firing precisions in a little arch. So a little metal up here, but basically just stone. Just look like a half circle of firing department, and obviously firing down the hill with the slopes the way this is constructed. It looks like a fairly sturdy construction. It also looks like something of a last stand type of thing. On a cement roof that's barely high enough for me to stand in here. That has come apart a little more. I can actually finally stand up straight. So the cement embrasures were placed inside a brick wall. Literally a shooting gallery that also slopes up. And then what do we come out to? What do we come up to? Ooh, holy crap on a stick. This looks somewhat familiar, doesn't it? This is an actual fortress. Let's see how thin the plate is. This was, well, we're on top of a hill. And in 1914, guess you weren't expecting your enemies to actually have howitzers plunging in on you, although mortars had been a thing for the longest time. This looks like it's just another firing line. Storage ammunition in here. You could dominate the whole valley. You imagine the trees would be gone. Planes weren't really a thing at this time, certainly not for the advancing Russian army. It looks like a fortified hill. If anything, it's not really a fortress, but is this where they stood when they were routed by the Cossacks? Because fighting up this hill must have been hard for anybody. This is a good 300-400 meters at a serious 45-degree angle slope. Nobody want to charge up that. So, and here's another shooting gallery. That is actually almost at a flanking angle to what we've just seen over here. So definitely this was the valley where I so far see most fire being directed. Still brick with the cement over, mortar over. This looked like it has been opened up by something, or it was larger to begin with. We'll see when I get inside. Alright, but all brick construction. There's more hilltop behind me, so what an interesting position. Well, look at this. This is much deeper. But here, individual little firing positions. So, does that connect to something down here? Well, it wasn't all that successful. And they certainly were defeated. Maybe this has something to do with the kind of thing they were exposed to. That one here had a good amount of damage. So I don't think something actually hit this. If you look at the spray of shrapnel inside the window there, something definitely hit this. So, all of these firing positions must have been built up on a step down floor, so there'll be steps for the shooters to stand on. And what do we get down to here? What is all this? I mean, except for broken, obviously. So it's just and look at this, there's so much more here. And like could have been destroyed by fire as well and began to break apart. I would certainly hope they had dirt and sandbags on top, but didn't look like it'd help much. Wow. Looks like another defensive position here. A firing wall that collapsed. It's really hard to see how what this once was. It looks like it could have been another circle gallery of sorts. So what's behind me? This circle's round. This circle's round here. Wow. There's another. This thing circled all the way around as a firing gallery here. So there's another one here. It's the roof of it. That feels solid enough to walk on. So again, a relatively small position overlooking a hill. I mean, certainly you could stand a fight on this, but just on the other side over here is the first one we saw. So either this is the outer bastions, something bigger, or this is just a very small hilltop. I'm gonna say fortification, I think would be the right word. Wow, look at this. This has been shot up. Yeah. This has been shot up very well. Look at all these impacts. This has very, let's say very serious damage to it, but it's sort of in ruins and come apart, so yes. Wow. I've never seen anything like this before. Never seen a layout like this before. It's absolutely amazing. Anything penetrated in here? Same embrasures, aiming somewhat downwards. I know they lost a lot of men here, and they fled head over tails towards Przemysl. So what happened here that made that happen? Is this the next?
I see trenches between them, obviously. You see, here's a trench, or what's left of a trench, to the next. Now, I would wager that this is defending to this side. So we almost have a full 360-degree defense. Certainly looks that way. These are almost mutually defending. Although here, looks like the door is actually pointing out towards enemy territory. But look at the terrain an enemy would have to scale to get up here. Look at the view they have. It is a dominating position. Absolutely. And here, this is even more interesting. Rebar. There's rebar in this cement here. And there's this section, the roof. It may just be rebar from the roof sections, but certainly there's cement and rebar. And this is rebar weaving itself into a brick and cement construction there. So there could have been a firing embrasure there. Looks like there's nothing really. I don't understand. There's There are firing. What? There's firing embraces. They're like they're supposed to be. I just couldn't see them from the outside. Why on earth could I not see these from the outside? Look at the damage on the roof of that one. And this one has just been blown away. Possibly part of the explosion that took down this section. So there were firing positions, like, look at the impact here. Something came through here. So this is just another one of these. You get little bullet holes, pock marks in the stone there. This is inside, so this could only have happened after this collapsed, or before it collapsed, when the side was shot away. Wow, this did not look optimistic for the people in here. Okay, now I see them. Alright, now I see them, now I see them. So that was possibly a door, maybe ended in a firing position. So if we go up and around, are there more? Let's have a look. You can see the trenches run down the hill there. The trenches runs between the small bunkers. The trenches also run behind them. So what's up here? With the trenches again, standing roughly on top of this hill here. And I really do get the feeling, the last stand kind of location feeling, where this is so, this is like the plateau, roughly the plateau. This gives me the feeling that whoever was cornered up here, they didn't get out. If they were surrounded, That was it. They had nowhere to go. Sitting on an exposed hilltop, surrounded by superior forces. Yeah, you can hold out till you run out. Roof plates are very thin. This is just a shelter. This would just be a shelter where officers would make planning for munition. And then, not much mistaken, the last were the first firing bunkers over there. Now, from what I understand, the fighting for the city left the city relatively undamaged, which tells me they didn't actually fight in the city with all the built up stone and ramparts they had in the city. I mean, they had a well fortified city in there. A whole bullet hole in there, or shell hole in there. It's just another one of these shelters. Looks like a little garage. Look at the stone. This has been shot at close range, and this has been shot at close range from the actual hilltop here itself, which means that this is a position that was overrun. Whatever happened here didn't go well for the dudes here. And here you have the other side of the hill. Definitely something came off here too, or landed here. This is a hilltop all the way around. Down there is the first little ring bunker I saw, which is there where we came. So there's a defensive arc from there to on the other side of that bunker. So what's on the other side here? Is there nothing, or is this protection? Let's go have a look at this and then go back up here. This is pretty intact. Well, the embrasures look like they've been opened up quite a bit with some fire here. They don't look intact. And this just continues down here to this hall. Just lots of these. And you see here was a little build-up for a raised floor for the gunners to stand on. Okay, so what does it look like on the outside of this thing? Are we damaged? Crap, yeah. There's some damage to this, certainly. Let's go all the way down there. Summit. See what's defending around here in the back. Here in the summit, artillery, mortar position trenches, trenches, with a stone, stone, trenches, crisscross trenches. natural stone. Describing what I'm walking over, in case you can't see it. This is so... looks like large artillery positions. It really does. And you are facing away from the city, so you could have rolled up these positions. You could have built this fairly quickly to defend from up here. That's why there's only forward facing positions, because this is where the enemy was coming from. And as I recall, the Austrian-Hungarians had left, or were packing up to leave Lviv, Lemberg, when they were ordered back and tried to hold, which is always a bad. Indecisiveness is always the killer of a good operation. This certainly looks like a man-made artificial artillery position, something. Some of these forest roads probably new, but they're certainly running over some of the old fighting positions of the Austro-Hungarians. And try to go a little bit further. But this entire hilltop is clearly a battlefield, full of holes, trenches, dugouts, small pillboxes. And I'm walking direction Lviv right now, which means they're defending to my rear, which means this would be the rear area, if ever there were one. That's why I don't see any bunkers, forts, or anything. But they're on a hilltop. They could overlook anything. Imagining the tree foliage was quite significantly different at the time. This is the back of the hill. This is the back of the hill, leading down to the roads down there. Nothing to see. No sign of fortifications or anything down there. This was the place where they tried to hold and failed and stood and died. See, here's again a little foxhole dugout that has filled up over time.
As I researched the universities and historical societies, even locally, here nobody knew what I had found. Even at the Fortress Society I spoke at, nobody had any idea. The authors and other historians who had written about this had only vague guesses. So after several years, I finally found out. This is the 𝐼𝐸𝐵𝐻𝐾 fort. Yes, I actually think I pronounced it almost correctly. The beginning of the construction dated back to 1887, when it was decided to strengthen the various cities' defenses. Here they constructed 11 smaller outer forts, mostly facing in a ring towards the east. The construction of the fort was complete in 1912. However, by that time it was finished, it was also obsolete. It was an open artillery fort, and given the advances in weaponry in the late 19th century, something this fort would soon face, these forts were mainly dirt mounds, trenches, and the brick and cement covered galleries or shelters. What improvements were made in the city is still unclear, but one defensive line further to the west was constructed in the face of the Russian advance. In the fort's center was placed an artillery battery, but it's not entirely certain that the Austrians also had armed the fort this way by 1914, and did not fight here. They evacuated this position without giving the Russians battle, as I initially had thought. The entire Battle of Galicia was an unprecedented disaster for the Austro-Hungarians. It had cost them over 350,000 casualties and crippled their professional pre-war army, forcing them now to heavily rely on German support for the remainder of the war. It came in 1915 during the counteroffensive led by General von Mackensen. The Russians had, in the meantime, equipped the fort with a battery of 3-inch 76mm cannons, 1902 guns, with a range of about 8,500 meters. The Germans, having located the hilltop fort, that was not at the time surrounded by forest as it is now, they drew up a battery of 305 mortars, the so-called 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿, something no fort of World War I could withstand. And this is how the assault went. According to one Russian soldier, after a few salvos of these heavy guns, the Russians abandoned the fight and the position here. This is where the battle scars came from, and also the holes in the ground. Now, the firing galleries were indeed connected by trenches, as I had expected, nearly circling the position. There was also heavy barbed wire around and on the glasses, also as expected. Now, there were 4 of these shelters, of which there are now only 2, apparently, and had the 2 others been hit by a 305, such a shelter would completely have vanished by today. But this is a fascinating journey in battlefield forensics, of going through such an old position, trying to gauge what it was, who had built it, and what had happened here, and then finding myself mostly correct later on. And of the other 10 forts here, most of them were completely destroyed during the city's growth or the airport expansion, although some parts of the others still remain. These I will look for over the next trips I am there. But there's more. What of the citadel in the beautiful old town? And it really is an amazing city, where I could finally get myself a cup of hot coffee. Now, there was an old garrison here, barracks, and a powerful citadel with 2 fortress towers on the most elevated position of the town, from where you could defend in all directions. And this they would do in 1918-1919, as the Austro-Hungarian Empire was dissolved by the end of World War I, and the territories here were now ceded to the new Polish Republic. They saw the Ukrainians now wanting their country and city back again, and soon a fight began between these fractions, seeing the Poles having to send for reinforcements, while the Ukrainian forces seeking to take control of the town were battling for the towers, which the Polish forces were ensconced in the town center. Thereafter, the Ukrainian forces took possession of the surrounding forts and laid siege to Lemberg. This was only broken after the Polish relief forces arrived. Now, Lviv remained under Polish administration for a while until World War II. The wider Polish-Ukrainian War continued until mid-1919, but the Polish victory of Lviv cemented the city's inclusion in the newly independent Republic of Poland.
And here of all places, I always wonder, specifically when I see damage like this, when was it from? Here's what looks like the old Citadel building that is being turned into a hotel. So this is what's left of the old city tower, the old citadel. You see the firing positions, cannon, ventilation, rifle, everything's in there. Even a little rounded stone ditch. The remnants of the old empire is hiding everywhere around town. You just have to look for them. These are projectile impacts. Here to one side of the citadel. This certainly does look like impacts to me. In fact, there's very little doubt this is projectile impact from battle. This would be here where it looks like the entrance would be. And the other tower, which sits some 150 meters from the first one, looks like it's in quite a lot better shape.
Naturally, Lviv would see war again during World War II, but that is a different story, and the little hilltop fortress would never again see fighting or being bombed, and is now left in peace overlooking a cemetery. Which is sadly more than one can say for Lviv itself. This was the city a few weeks ago before I left. Hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel, liking, follows, and maybe even join me on Patreon to help out. I am just a guy, a historian, traveling around all these historic places in Europe on my own dime, trying to bring them to you.